Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. It's been a busy midweek of European football. Arsenal comfortable winners over Paris Saint-Germain. A couple of days on, we'll discuss what we've learned. We're also going to talk about Thomas Partey's performance, which was far better than I think I'd accounted for in the immediate aftermath of the game. And we'll identify who just might be the missing piece for Mikel Arteta's Gunners after some impressive Champions League displays in midweek. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Like, subscribe, all of that stuff. You know the drill by now. Let's get into today's episode. Hey everybody, how you doing? Hope you're all good. Hope you're all well. Thank you for joining me on another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. We've got quite a bit to get into, considering that we played on Tuesday. It's now Thursday, so we've done all the reaction stuff to the PSG game. I do want to kind of carry some of that over into today's episode, though, because there's a few points I want to make. Still, I guess, in relation to that game, I think it's a little bit too early to bring you the preview of the Southampton game, so we'll bring you that tomorrow, and we'll look ahead to that one, who should play, who maybe could do with a rest. Is there any scope for us to do that, really, given that there's an international break? Is it going to be the last game without Martin Odegaard? Hopefully, we'll get into all of that on tomorrow's episode of the show. But for now, I want to focus on what we've seen in midweek, and I want to focus on some of the players that really caught my eye playing for other clubs in the UEFA Champions League phase over the past few days. And could one of them be the missing piece for Mikel Arteta's side? We'll get into that in a bit more detail as we make our way through the podcast. I do want to start off by talking Thomas Partey, though, because those of you that are here regularly, that listen to the show regularly, will know that on a number of occasions this season, I've been deeply concerned, should we put it that way, by what I perceive to be a lack of legs when it comes to Thomas Partey. I think that his mobility level is definitely down from what it was, and I think that especially in the absence of Martin Odegaard, we've had to play a bit more conservatively, partly because we don't have the guy that we funnel most of our play through available to us, but also partly because I don't know that you can trust Thomas Partey to marshal large spaces like you could have done a year ago and maybe in the season before that. So I'm a little bit worried about the longer term with Thomas Partey. I say that, but then I wonder if there is even a longer term, or if it is literally this season, his contract comes to an end at the end of the campaign. And I'm pretty sure that at that point, we'll say goodbye. Thomas Partey will move on, hopefully having won something big at the football club. But yeah, I think we've been babysitting him a bit at the start of this season. And I think that that's partly because of, as I say, Odegaard's absence, but partly because there's been a recognition or an acknowledgement internally that Thomas Partey isn't the same Thomas Partey that you could trust to marshal a huge space in midfield, to cover a gaping hole in midfield, 2-3 seasons ago. So we're in this place now where I think I just have to kind of adjust my expectations of him. In the Champions League, though, against Paris Saint-Germain the other night, I thought he looked immense. And again, the formation was different. It was kind of more like a 4-4-2, as we discussed, which meant that he was never left in isolation to kind of marshal that space in front of the centre-halves. He had Declan Rice alongside him, and the pair were working as a two and as a unit. And he looked a lot more comfortable, and has looked a lot more comfortable playing that way. Think back to Spurs away, looked really, really comfortable in there with Jorginho. Think back to Man City away. I know we were camped on the edge of our box for pretty much the entire second half, but that's what we needed to do. And Thomas Partey, having had some of the big spaces taken away from him, was very, very effective and useful that day as well. So what I am saying is that watching the Champions League game back the other night, it kind of sparked a thought in my mind, which is, yeah, there are worries, at least in my head, about how much we can rely on Thomas Partey moving forward, partly because of all we've seen in the past, which is injury after injury after injury, and partly because of what we've seen at the start of this season, which I think is Thomas Partey's mobility level dropping. So I look at it now and I think, well, in the Champions League, is that as much of a problem? Watching the game back the other night really kind of brought home to me the point that the Champions League is very, very, very different to the Premier League. The levels of intensity are different. Clubs that don't play that way week in, week out, i.e. Paris Saint-Germain, they'll turn up and they'll have a lot of the ball. But because they move the ball quite a bit slower, because the intensity and general pace of the game is quite a bit lower, you often have time to shuffle across, get into the right position. It's not like in the Premier League where it's really kind of fast and frenetic and frantic, whereby if you step out of position once against certain opposition, you're probably not going to recover and you're going to leave a gaping hole. That isn't the case in Europe. And that's not just something that you can say is true of a game with Paris Saint-Germain. I'm sure it will be the same when we play Shakhtar Donetsk. I'm sure it will be the same when we play Sporting or Girona or whoever, because the game on the continent is just generally a little bit different. And I've kind of noticed that again after watching the PSG game back, because they had a lot of the ball and they did a lot of good things with it. And it was a decent performance from Luis Enrique's side, I thought. But obviously on a couple of moments, we took advantage of maybe their fragilities and weaknesses and we were able to make them pay. And then it was pretty comfortable, just sort of keeping them at arm's length. So I guess my view on Thomas Partey's performance was, yes, very good on that night and in that context, and someone that will be very useful to us over the course of the season. We've already found him to be incredibly useful to us. People sort of take this as if I'm like doing these hit pieces on Thomas Partey, which is absolutely not what I'm doing. But I think to be at the top, to get to the top and to stay at the top, you always have to be thinking on the fly. You always have to be thinking on the move. You can't rest on your laurels at any point. And the great thing about what Mikel Arteta's Arsenal have shown us, I think, over the last few months is that they won't do that. They are constantly looking to evolve. They're constantly looking to change, to develop, to adapt to the scenario in front of them. And, changing the formation in midfield would have been partly down and probably largely down to Odegaard's absence. But I also think it will be partly down to where we see Thomas Partey being at these days and how we think that we can protect him in order to get the best out of him so that his strengths can shine through and his weaknesses can be masked a little bit. So I wanted to give Thomas Partey his flowers for the other night because I thought he was really, really good. Made some really smart interceptions, some really good tackles, took up some really good positions, helped us in our build-up play as well when we did go after PSG. So really, really pleased with his performance. And the fact that the European game is so different gives me confidence that we still have lots of use for Thomas Partey. And the other good thing is, obviously, look, Mikel Merino's back and he came into the side the other night. I think he looked off the pace, but that was absolutely to be expected, given the summer he had and then obviously the disruption to his getting up to speed at Arsenal due to the injury. But I look at it and I think, well, with Merino coming into the picture, you can use Rice as a 6 now if you want to play with 1-6. You can use Merino as part of a double pivot in the way that you're using Rice and Partey now. Just having that extra option means that we can protect the Ghanaian a little bit more. And we all know that he needs it. It just means that we have different options. We can change things up a bit. And when we get Martin Odegaard back too, we are going to be cooking in that midfield. I'm really, really excited about what the combination of all of those players can give us in terms of adaptability, changing the dynamics when we need to, etc., etc. So really, really excited by what he's going to bring to the team. And obviously, I think that benefits Thomas Partey somewhat. Some might say, well, it means he'll play less, so how's it benefiting him? Maybe it does mean he plays less, but I think we all agree that that's probably the only way that you're going to keep Thomas Partey fit for an entire season without his level significantly dropping. So it's probably something that we need to be trying to make happen. And with Merino back, we can. I also want to pay tribute to Aston Villa. Now, I don't often do this with other Premier League clubs because as an Arsenal fan, at some point or another, over the last 25 years of my life, there would have been a time where I was annoyed with pretty much every other club, right? So you don't want to be praising rival clubs and all the rest of it. But I feel like recently, where I've been tasked with covering other clubs and doing different things in the game of football, I have discovered the ability to be a little bit more open-minded and to be a lot more complimentary about fellow Premier League clubs if I think they deserve it. And I really do think Aston Villa do. Listen, you will all know that I didn't think Unai Emery was the right man for Arsenal. Those of you that have been with us on the pod for a long, long time will remember that I was one of the first to turn on Unai Emery. And I went on countless shows at the time and got absolutely hammered. Absolutely hammered. And in a weird way, it's kind of like the Unai Emery thing, that whole debate, that whole discussion. It feels like that was kind of the lift-off point for the Chronicles of a Gooner as a podcast, because at the time we didn't have that many listeners. And I was going on and I was talking about Emery, not in a ranty type of way, not because it was me trying to say something for effect, because I genuinely had concerns about his suitability to the Arsenal job and the direction we were heading in. And people kept looking at it from a totally zoomed out perspective and saying, no, but we're on course to fight for top four, which is what we want to do. And we've gone to the Europa League final. And after the first season, when I was saying, I'm not sure about this guy, people were going, you're an idiot, mate. Like, we missed out on the top four by 1 point. We were miles off it under Wenger. And we went to a European final, blah, blah, blah. And I kept saying, yeah, but you got to zoom in. You got to look at the granular details. You got to understand the dynamics. You got to understand the ins and outs of what's happening at this football club. You got to think about what's going on upstairs. And you got to understand that we need a really strong leader who can unite everybody and lead us through that. And in Unai Emery, I never felt we had that, because what we had was someone that even the club didn't put total faith in. They didn't give him enough control around transfers, in my opinion, but they also only gave him a 2-year contract, right? So you knew from the beginning that they weren't 100% sold on the Emery project, and you knew that it was something that might have worked in the short term, but probably was never going to be a long-term solution. People started to get onto me and criticized me a lot about that, but in time began to agree with me. And when Unai Emery was sacked, it felt like people started to gravitate towards the podcast, because not because I'm saying I'm always right, but I think because people felt that the points that we were making were valid, and even if they disagreed, there was some discussion here that was worthwhile at the very least listening to, right? So the Unai Emery thing didn't work for Arsenal, probably worked for me a little bit in terms of getting me onto things because of my opinion that I would never have got onto. And it was a genuine opinion, so I'm not for a second suggesting that it was for effect or anything like that. I genuinely felt that way at the time. Anyway, look at it now, and Unai Emery is doing an unbelievable job at Aston Villa. Unbelievable job. I don't want to take anything away from him, okay? I think that there are debates that you can have around Unai Emery and maybe what his ceiling is as a manager. I think all of that would be fair game if you wanted to comment on that, if you wanted to discuss that. But I think when you look at the job that he's done at Aston Villa, you can do nothing but give the guy flowers, because he's just done amazing things. To take them from where they were under Steven Gerrard to create this immediate upturn and then lead them to Champions League, and then not just lead them into the Champions League. And I know, the format is different now and things work slightly differently, but to take them away to young boys who, are a tricky opponent, mainly because of that plastic pitch as well. That is a nightmare. But to turn up there, win convincingly, and then to turn up and beat Bayern Munich in your first home game back in the Champions League is incredible. The feel-good factor around that club right now is through the roof, and Unai Emery is responsible for that. So let's give him his credit for the job that he's done there. He's done a wonderful job at Sevilla in the past, at Villarreal in the past. Maybe not so good at Paris Saint-Germain. Did a good job at times with Valencia. He's had a really good career, Unai Emery. It just wasn't to be at Arsenal. And again, I think you should be able to separate the Unai Emery is a good manager, but maybe wasn't the right fit for Arsenal at the same time. Those two opinions, in my view, can coexist. And, it feels like when you hear the debate and discussion around him now, when Arsenal fans say, no, he wasn't the guy for us, everybody goes, oh, you're idiots, because he's great. He is good. He's really good. But he wasn't the right guy for us, for what we needed, for what we required at the time. But anyway, the reason I wanted to talk about Aston Villa is because when thinking about what the missing piece could be for Arsenal, we spent a lot of the summer talking about centre-forward options, and one of the centre-forwards that we were very heavily linked with at the start of the window had a cracking night last night for RB Leipzig in the UEFA Champions League, and we'll talk about Benjamin Sesko in a little bit. But I was watching Jhon Duran last night, and I started to think. Now, first of all, let me be clear. I don't think this is anything that is in the pipeline. So I'm not sitting here telling you this is transfer news. What I'm telling you is that this is a player that I really, really like. There are some positives and negatives, I think, when it comes to Jhon Duran, but generally, I really like him. He's a bit of a maverick. He's a bit of a larger-than-life character. He's the kind of guy that probably will upset you from time to time. But he seems to have this incredible knack of stepping up when the moment's right. And we've seen that a lot at the start of this season. We saw it at points last season as well. But when you think about all that went on with him over the summer, right? He thought he was going to West Ham. He told everyone he wanted to go to West Ham. He was doing the Irons sign down a camera. Then he turns up and scores a goal at West Ham for Aston Villa. And it feels like him and Unai Emery kind of resolved that situation. Was it even a thing between him and Emery? Was it a thing between him and the club? Who knows? But ultimately, Unai Emery has found a way of extracting the very, very best of Jhon Duran. Now, do I think that his overall game is good enough for me to insist that, let's say, for argument's sake, he came to Arsenal, he would start for us week in, week out? Probably not. Is his hold-up play that great? Not sure. Is his all-round game sophisticated enough? Again, not sure. And how can I be sure when he's just a super sub for Aston Villa, which is ultimately what he is. But what he is he's a difference maker. And so I look at him and I think to myself, our overall game with Kai Havertz through the middle is really good. And it works really, really well. But people at times are crying out for that out-and-out goal scorer. So is the solution to bring in someone who is an out-and-out goal scorer, but who's going to be in and out of the team a bit like Jhon Duran is at Aston Villa, rather than saying we have to go and spend £100 million on a centre forward and he's got to start every single week, which means that Kai Havertz doesn't, and we completely change the way that we play. So could someone like Jhon Duran be the solution? Now, I know he would cost a pretty penny, and I know that Aston Villa would never sell to us, given that they want to be competing with us, unless the deal was really, really worth their while. Jhon Duran isn't afraid to tell his club when he wants to join another club, as we've already seen. So could that be something that we potentially make happen? I don't know. His goal last night was just incredible. His goal against Bayern Munich was unreal. The ball was played through to him. To have, the awareness of where Manuel Neuer is without really looking. To have the confidence to take that on in a game like that, and then the technical brilliance to execute it, is just magnificent. And I think he had another amazing moment last night, and he's definitely someone that I would be looking at. Definitely someone that would be on my radar if I was Arsenal Football Club. Not saying we're going to sign him in January or anything like that, but you get where I'm going with this. Could somebody of Duran's makeup, could Duran himself be the missing piece? Do we have to bring in this out-and-out goal scorer as a regular starter, or could it be in the shape of a super sub? Because I tell you this, I like the player. I like him a lot, and I had real high hopes that he was going to return to good form this season. But do you ever feel when Gabriel Jesus comes onto the pitch midway through a game, 3/4 of the way through a game, that he's going to come on and score a vital goal? Because I don't. I don't get that feeling with Gabriel Jesus, but I get it with Jhon Duran. And so I'm wondering if that's the route we go down with regards to the out-and-out goal scorer that everybody seems to want. We're going to come over to the live chat in a minute and get you guys' thoughts on what we've discussed in part one. We're going to talk Partey. We're going to talk Jhon Duran. There's a couple of other names flying around in the chat as well. We'll do that right after this. I just want to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by NordVPN, the best VPN service out there. It's a service that I myself have plenty of experience using, and you can sign up now via the link below. Visit nordvpn.com/ChroniclesAFC for a mega discount and 4 months free at the end of your plan. With NordVPN, not only do I have extra protection when surfing the web, downloading and streaming, but I also have the ability to change my virtual location with the click of a button. That means I can access content that's geo-blocked, use streaming services not available in the UK, and when I'm traveling, I'm able to log into my Sky Go, TNT Sports and BBC iPlayer, meaning I miss nothing when it comes to what the pundits are saying about our club. Sign up now via nordvpn.com/ChroniclesAFC and take advantage of this amazing offer. Plus, with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, it's totally risk-free. If you don't like it, get your money back. Cancel it. You won't regret it. nordvpn.com/ChroniclesAFC. We thank them for their amazing support of the podcast. Okay, let's go over into the live chat and see what you guys are saying. We've touched on Emery, we've touched on Partey, we've touched on Jhon Duran as well. Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat box. Lots of praise for Thomas Partey. Always Forward 1886 says both Thomas Partey and Jorginho will be gone after this season. Maybe they will. Maybe they will. Because I do think that to play the way that we play, you do require more legs than what we have from those guys at the moment. But obviously we found a way, and that's what's so impressive about Arsenal right now. We lean on our strengths and we find ways to bring the best out of the players that we do have available to us. Ekal Howard says, don't underestimate Partey. Partey plays the single pivot better than Rice, and Marino can't play 6. Why did we re-sign Jorginho then? Jorginho's been sitting on the bench collecting 150k. Jorginho's a really, really important part of the squad. I'm not going to have the downplaying of Jorginho's influence, because Jorginho's been our coach on the sidelines how many times as well. And, you know, there are rumours and reports and suggestions that he is open to taking on a coaching role at Arsenal that would see him move into a position behind the scenes later on. And if he's on the same page as Arteta and he can convey his message onto the pitch, then I'm happy to have him about. His experience is great. His influence is really strong from what we hear, from what we read, from all the interviews that we get access to. So, yeah, I'm fine with Jorginho knocking around. The Partey thing, yeah, I guess Partey plays the single pivot better than Rice in some ways. So I've always said that I think he's better with the ball at his feet. I would trust Thomas Partey to find that progressive pass earlier than Declan Rice and to execute it better than Declan Rice. No doubt about that. On the ball, he offers more. No question in my mind whatsoever about that. However, off the ball, he can't offer what Declan Rice can. He can't eat up the ground the way that Declan Rice can. He's not as physically robust as Declan Rice is anymore. And that is the reality of the situation. I keep using the term babysitting Thomas Partey, not because I think he's a crap player, but because I think some of his strengths have waned a little bit. And it's natural because of the stage at his career in which we're at. So, you know, people take it in a negative way and they get all defensive of Partey as if I'm saying he's useless and I want him out the door. I was the one that said how many times during the summer, don't sell him, because unless someone's going to cough up big money for him, which was never going to happen, then we can get a lot of use out of Partey still, and he can be an asset to the group. What else have we got? Always Forward, in response to that comment from Howard, says, I think Partey's on even more than Georgie. Also, Georgie is great with the younger players and helps with development. Agreed. Some suggestions in the chat that maybe Partey would get a contract extension. I don't see it. I don't see it at the minute. I think he'd need to prove himself over a slightly longer period of time for that to come into Arteta and Arsenal's thinking. You've got to think about the fact that Arsenal didn't want to spend what they spent on Mikel Merino because of his age. And you think that with Partey's injury history, they're going to just roll out a massive deal for him. I'm not sure. Trev says, from what you've seen so far, not asking for a prediction, but what do you believe we can achieve this season? Honestly, looking at how adaptable we are, looking at how physically imposing we are, looking at how technically good we are, even with some real key players missing, the sky's the limit for this Arsenal team. And that's why I'm really, really excited about what remains in this campaign. Could we win the Champions League? Absolutely we could. Could we win the Premier League? Absolutely we could. Those are the two big ones. Are we capable of winning the Cups? Of course we are. I'm really, really excited. I think that we can be crowned champions of England this season. I really, really do believe that. And I'm hoping that we achieve it. I've always said, for me personally, the Champions League is the big one because I've never seen it. I grew up watching Arsenal win the Premier League, 97-98 season. Probably the first season I remember football very clearly. I remember going to the parade when we won the double. Then, of course, I watched us win the league in 01-02, 03-04. So I've seen Arsenal win the Premier League as invincibles, as double winners. It was amazing. But what I haven't seen is Arsenal be crowned European champions. And if we could do that, if this team could be the ones that do that, wow, it'd be amazing. It'd be amazing. Joey says, cheers, Harry. First live in a long while. Emery didn't have the tools. Just moving on to that subject. I agree with you. He didn't have the tools, but I also don't think he did enough necessarily to warrant the club financing him in the way that they financed Mikel Arteta. I think sometimes you get a vibe and a feeling for someone, and if they're on the right track or the right path. And as I say, I go back to that appointment, which we know was an appointment that was made after we spoke to Mikel Arteta, who decided not to take the job at that time. So you always knew that it wasn't the first choice. You always knew that he wasn't the number one on the list. And because of that, there was a reluctance from the club, I think, to give him what he probably needed, which then came across on the pitch because the club's reluctance led to the side not being strong enough and led to maybe Unai Emery not being able to do what he's capable of. Villa are all in on Unai Emery. They always have been, and that's obviously been massively helpful to them. Guys, if you haven't done so already, please leave a like on the video. It really, really does help. Subscribe to the channel as well if you are new. On the likes front, we're slacking badly. Given how many of you are with us, there's no reason we shouldn't have 250 likes on the board. So let's get there ASAP. And if you're listening to us on audio, remember to keep leaving us those reviews, even if you've done it before, particularly if you're an Apple Podcast listener, because we lost a load, as I mentioned, when we transferred out of a network and into a kind of independent sphere, which is a real shame. I don't know why that happened. They just seem to have dropped off the profile. I can see them on review sites, but I can't see them on Apple Podcasts. So if you could do that again for me, I'd be hugely appreciative of that. And on those likes on YouTube, come on, guys, let's get them up. Right, let's turn our attention to another player that impressed me in the Champions League last night, and that is Benjamin Sesko. Yes, I'm getting used to saying that the correct way. I've said Sesko for so long. Found it quite difficult to make that change. Anyway, watching him in action last night for RB Leipzig against Juventus was just a kind of reminder of what a star he can be. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that from the very beginning I was always, it's Sesko, he's the one, that's the guy we need to go out and get. I had my reservations about him. I did, for a long time. And when everybody else was telling me, no, he's the guy, he's the one, I wasn't sure. It took me a lot longer to warm to the idea of Benjamin Sesko coming to Arsenal than it did, I think, for a lot of people. And my mind changed when I sat down to put together the scouting report episode that we did here on the Chronicles of a Gooner. I spent a lot of time looking into him, watching him, and I got to the point where I started to think, hold on a minute. You know, this guy has got quite a bit about him. This guy has got a lot of the things that I'm hoping we can acquire in a striker. And then we were rocked by the news that Benjamin Sesko had decided that he was going to stay at RB Leipzig for a bit longer, and the move was off. The deal was dead. It wasn't going to happen this summer. Always with the feeling that it could happen later down the line, and I still think it could. But we were told unequivocally, basically, that he was staying at RB Leipzig, and we had to turn our attentions elsewhere. Arsenal didn't go crazy and go back into the market and dump a load of money on a centre forward. They didn't do it because clearly, in my opinion, they've got someone in mind that wasn't attainable last summer. Someone that they believe is the guy, and someone that they'd be happy to drop that sort of money on a year down the line if all goes well. And I believe that that is Benjamin Sesko, and I believe that come next summer, Arsenal will be back in there knocking on RB Leipzig's door, trying to make a deal happen. And the more I watch him, the more I think he'd be a great fit. The goal that he scored last night, the first goal, where Openda played him in behind. If you haven't seen it, go on YouTube and type in RB Leipzig Juventus highlights. The way he takes it down and the way he rifles it to the underside of the bar and into the back of the net was just sensational. He took a penalty later in the game that he converted really well. And I just think that Benjamin Sesko's all-round game is really, really well suited to Arsenal. I think he could give you a lot of what Kai Havertz gives you, but with a bit more of a ruthless streak in front of goal. Now, that again, just like I was talking about Partey earlier, it's not to take anything away from Havertz, because I think he's our most important player right now. I really do believe that. I think he's so key to everything that this Arsenal team does. But over the course of the season, will I be watching Benjamin Sesko now much closer? Yeah, I will. Because I am on that hype train, and I believe that he could be the missing piece for this Arsenal side. But again, he falls into that kind of Jhon Duran category where I look at him and I go, okay, you're a good player, but does it mean that I'd have to play you every single week? And the answer is no. You can come in and out of the side. You can play in the games where it suits us to utilize your strengths, and in the games where it doesn't, where the game plan's slightly different, you can be a player that comes in and out of the side. But a Jhon Duran or a Benjamin Sesko would give me far more confidence when turning to the bench in need of a goal than, unfortunately, I hate to say it, Gabriel Jesus does these days. So yeah, I think he could be the guy. But I do think I'm onto something when I say whoever comes in as that centre forward that we've all been clamouring for a long time doesn't necessarily have to be someone coming in to displace a starter. It could be someone that adds another string to our bow in the squad sense. It could be someone that comes in and just gives us a different dimension, at times even off the bench. So the two players that we've highlighted on today's pod as potentially being the missing piece, Jhon Duran from Aston Villa or Benjamin Sesko from RB Leipzig. Let me know what you think of them, particularly in Jhon Duran's case. I want to see a bit more because while I think he's got that kind of moment in him and that character and that maverick star quality, I do feel like he might just be going through a bit of a purple patch. That's kind of my, I'm getting all carried away by what he's doing week in, week out, but there's that nagging voice in the back of my head that says it might just be a purple patch. So I'm not as big on him as I am on Benjamin Sesko, who we've been monitoring and watching for a much longer period of time. But both of those players feel like players that could enhance and could add something to this Arsenal squad moving forward. Let me know your thoughts in the live chat box and in the comment section after we finish. I am, guys, going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining me on today's episode of the Chronicles of a Goon. I really, really appreciate the support. Appreciate you guys being here. Don't forget to leave a like on the video if you haven't done so already. We're nowhere near that target. Come on, like. It's free. It doesn't cost a thing. And it helps me so much. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you're listening on audio, get those reviews in. They really, really do help. And we'll be back tomorrow with our preview of the Arsenal versus Southampton game. It's important that we put another 3 points on the board before the international break. And Southampton don't look great at the start of the season. They feel like we can get them. And let's do that and go into the international break in a far more comfortable place. I'll see you all on the other side. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Have a great day. Goodbye.